So check 1, 2, 3, check 1, 2, 3. Am I audible to the people at the back? Yes? Okay, thank you. I'm going to start off with 3 apologies. First of all, I don't speak behind a podium, so I'm going to walk the room. So I apologize for that. Secondly, I speak my mind, and I will challenge you to the extent that with my 4 decades of experience in education, teaching finance, investment banking, investment management, and investment consulting, I'm going to put finance at the core of it, contrary to many in this conference and convention, where it seems to me technology is ahead of finance. I do think finance is very important, and I will use my academic skills with big data, machine learning, and optimization theory over 3 decades across 3 continents, also to show how fintech is critical and essential for the world going forward. So without further ado, I would like to first of all start off by thanking SFF, GFTN, and most of all, Swapnendu Mohanty, Team Padro, Mingen, and my introducer, MC Sharanji Dell, for being very kind, and she's also an educator and a leader, so I'm very privileged to be able to get some of your time space. So let's get started. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to give you a sustainability take on SDGs, and you will say, who are you to talk about SDGs? I've been working with the SDGs for about 3 decades. They used to be called Millennial Development Goals. They were set up by the UN and World Bank to address the goals of emerging markets. I was an emerging markets researcher and consultant. So in 2015, the richer countries came and said, hey, these goals should apply even to richer countries. Why only to poorer countries? And bingo, in 2015, what initially was called Millennial Development Goals became Sustainable Development Goals with a time horizon of 15 years. So the goals are supposed to be 17, time horizon of 15 years, and I will also end by showing you how the company I work for uses big data analytics with sports, insurance, etc. I may not be able to go through most of it, so you will have access to these slides in 4 or 5 days' time. So please keep up with me. I want to start off with the Sustainable Development Goals. What do we see when the UN talked about Sustainable Development Goals? And I feel in this conference, in academia and investments, we sometimes miss out on it. It says it's a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. I want all of you to address the question, who do we want technology for? Who do we want finance for? Who do we want sustainability for? 8.2 billion people on planet Earth. So let's not forget people. I'm a big fan of AI, and I'm going to promote a book by one of my ambassadors who talked about AIification of jobs. It's a brilliant book by Hui Van Jian, and you may want to pick it up. So all countries and all stakeholders are supposed to help on this, and they talked about 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets. So then let's see. This is what I've been doing last 25 years, advising investors across 71 countries on pensions, on investments in future funds, on sovereign wealth funds, and insurance companies. And demographics, to me, is not about people's age. It's about people as consumers and workers. So when you look at this acronym out here, demographics affects discount rates, mortality, geography, geopolitics, inflation, systemic risks, and all of those. And I argue in my book how it affects gender, sustainability, income, and there are a lot of very technical things, but not a single formula, because I just rely on references. So let's move to SDGs. These are the 17 SDGs. They were set up. The target is 2030. I will give you a roadmap, but I will only cover the top 5, and I'm most passionate about gender equality. I've been talking about gender equality to the Japanese, French, German, Swiss prime ministers from the year 2000. So last year, President Thurman said, Singapore should be like Japan. And I just sent a LinkedIn saying, I've only advised 3 Japanese prime ministers face-to-face and the Chinese prime minister. So we need to think about gender equality very, very seriously. That's the big elephant in the room. So let's look at where we are on Sustainable Development Goals according to the UN. This is a self-assessment. And what do we do when we do self-assessment? We say we are better than what we are. And if this is the better than what we are, I'm really, really very, very scared, because we are severely off track on the 17 goals. So green is on track, and red is regression. And on lots of these goals, like hunger and poverty and healthy lives, we are regressing, particularly after the COVID crisis and also after the global financial crisis. So we are not doing very well. Only 17% is regression, whereas 17% is on track. We should have been more than 50% on track. Now let's look at the average SDG score. So if we are supposed to hit 100 by 2030, where is the whole world today? We are roughly at about 65%. And if you look at the poorer countries, we are hardly at 52% of our goals. This is 2024, end of 2024. We hardly have 6 years within which countries are supposed to go from 65% to 100%. And that's why we really need to do a lot more. Technology cannot do it, my friends. It is you and I, along with technology, along with finance, who have to change the world. So do not put technology and finance ahead of people. It's all about us across generations and countries. When you look at proportion of countries with data, this is UN saying we do not have good data across all countries. Now I want everyone to look at me for just 30 seconds. I taught derivatives the day of the 87 crash in Boston to State Street, Fidelity, and Putnam portfolio managers. Since then, most of my career is talking about risk management models, Asian crisis, Brazilian GFC. And what do we know about risk management? One sentence you should take down. Define the risk, monitor the risk, measure the risk, and manage the risk. If we cannot define the risks because the data is not timely, the data is not good quality, and the data is not comparable, we do not have a hope in hell, pardon my French, of achieving any of the SDGs. That's like cheating. It's like me saying, okay, I can go and run 100 meters in 12 seconds, but instead of 100 meters, I just do 20 meters. So we should not cheat. We need very good data, and the data availability is where FinTech really needs to help. The next thing it says, where can FinTech really help? This is a very big agency where we really need to go. And when we look at China, India, BRIC countries, or even US and UK, the statistical agencies are not doing the right job. Because if you cannot measure poverty, hunger, literacy in the poorest countries, how will you get rid of it? And here we show that the NSOs show journalists, policymakers, as well as data producers need to do much better. Who can help? FinTech. But first of all, we need to define how does good data get collected, how does it get compared, and then how does it become good usable information. Let's look at the first Sustainable Development Goal, poverty. 9.7% of the world is in extreme poverty, with 590 million people. And the global working poverty rate just decreased from 7.7% to 6.9%. Yet, 241 million workers are in extreme poverty. 241 million. That's half of the EU. So we've not made good progress on poverty. Next goal is hunger. The deep yellow is extremely high food prices, and the light yellow is moderately high food prices. 733 million people last year faced hunger, and 2.33 billion people experienced moderate to severe food insecurity. Zero hunger requires sustainable, resilient, and equitable food systems. You can talk all you want about technology, but if we don't have food, we don't have drinking water, we don't have air, we cannot make progress on AI, machine learning, and other things. So hunger is very, very important, and food insecurity is very high. When you go to Niger and Malawi and poorer countries in Africa and Asia, you will find that the median age is roughly 1/3 that of Japan and Singapore. Let's look at the third one, health and well-being. And on this indicator also, COVID-19 has undone a lot of progress. But I want to highlight some things which are very important. While HIV/AIDS has decreased in the world, tuberculosis and malaria has increased. And all over the world, children aren't healthier relative to what they were 5 years ago. To get that, we need universal healthcare working, and I'll show you some ways in which we can do that. Look at this chart that I'm showing you. This is very important because it affects Singapore, Japan, Italy, Germany, the oldest country. These countries have aging consumers, but they have aging workforce. Their doctors, 46% are very old. 14% nurses are old. Dentists are old. Pharmacists are old. So how will you tackle that? We need a global workforce whereby jobs can be done remotely, or we can bring in short-term immigrants from younger countries. We need to think about health. Health is paramount, and in my book I say, health is wealth. Fourth sustainable development goal is quality education. Remember, I said we can't solve any of the FinTech progress goals that Mr. Ravi Menon articulated, which are our goals and our dreams, without thinking about people. And in terms of education, 58% of worldwide students have just had reading proficiency. That's far too little relative to the sustainable development goals. And we have a deficit in teachers to meet these minimum standards. We need to invest in human capital. And while we talk FinTech, I think human capital is at the core of bringing FinTech into changing policy and changing society. And at the core of human capital is education. Then I come to my most favorite part, and I've been doing this since 2000, gender equality. The elephant in the room, ladies and gentlemen, is something no one wants to talk about. And that is, why don't we treat women fairly? Last year, one of my college seniors, Ajay Banga, ended the conference saying, if we can't talk about gender equality, we should not talk about anything else. And I'm on exactly the same plane, because women outlive men. They are better educated than men in the G20, yet they are only given roughly 19% less jobs and paid 32% less even today. This is the proportion of women who make decisions regarding their own sexual and reproductive health and rights. And please note one number. I want everyone to note one number. 230 million women today, in today's world, still suffer FGM. And that is a crime in today's world. We cannot talk about progress without thinking about that. Now, this is the paper I wrote for the Milken Conference in 2019. This is not stories. I would challenge anyone at master's level to go through the statistics of this to look at how, across 143 countries, I gleaned to data from the UN and IMF and showed if gender equality improves, we get 4 golden dividends. Growth goes up, debt goes down, sustainability goes up, and inequality goes down. And these 4 golden dividends, this is absolutely a no-brainer. Why can't the world adopt this? Now, beyond GDP, we focus a lot on GDP. I typically look at 4 indicators for every country. One is Human Development Index. That's the quality of life. And Germany is at 7, US is at 20, Portugal 42. I'm just showing you some European countries. On the Gender Gap Index, Japan is 125 in the world rankings, Germany is 6th, US, the mighty US is 43. Corruption Perception Index, US is 24, Greece is 59, Italy is 43. And on sustainability again, Germany is 4. Look where US is, 46. So those are things I look at. Now let's move to some other people. Why do we have a problem with sustainability? Why has ESG not been very successful? And the key can be answered here. This is just one of the templates MSCI has done, S&P has another one, Sustainalytics another one. E is for environment, S for social, G for governance. And these are the indicators. You don't need to know all the indicators, just take my bottom line regarding what's wrong. E is not independent of S, is not independent of G. The indicators in E cannot be properly defined and measured, but they are much better than S and G. If we cannot measure S and G properly and understand the correlations with E, ESG can never be successful. So we need to simplify, think deeper, and agree on the criteria for ESG. Otherwise, ESG will remain quite unsuccessful because we do not agree on definitions, we cannot measure and monitor it. How many of you have heard of the global financial crisis? Most of you? I assume you're tech, but you still know some finance probably, or are aware of some of it. Now, during the global financial crisis, Mr. Trichet at the ECB research conference just after the crisis said, we could not have avoided the global financial crisis because it was a systemic global crisis. And we did not have any definition of systemic risk. The Fed did not have, SEC did not, Bank of Japan, MAS, none of us had an agreed on definition. We need definitions if we are going to do good ESG. Same thing with climate investing. And this is from MSCI, the task force for climate disclosures and company disclosures needs to be better, but at the same time, we are really expanding in terms of investment assets linked to ESG assets. It's growing exponentially, and currently the AUM is very, very huge. It's growing beyond 325 in terms of direct and indirect assets. Now let's look at terminology. The terminology has really changed. Net zero, we are out from COP26, we are actually on to COP29, the Paris Agreement, UNPRI, and there's a lot of greenwashing. In UK, we recently had elections, we have a new government. So let me tell you what's going on with climate change in London. They want most companies to report Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. But smaller companies with less than 10 employees and with a turnover which is not very high are being asked to report numbers that they cannot. And if you don't take small companies into consideration, you will not be able to get good disclosures. So a lot of it, again, has to do with how FinTech can help, and I think Singapore FinTech Festival leads the world in showing how we can take good data, analyze it, simplify it, and make it measurable for the future. Otherwise, I think we will still have a lot of greenwashing, and at COP29, which is roughly in another 10, 12 days' time, there will be a lot of discussion on how the legality of some of these targets works. Then I show you out here, this is from Thomson Reuters. Corporates are really engaged. They're using third-party solutions. They are seeing how it affects corporate performance. They're looking at competitive advantage. So Coke looks at Pepsi, Shell looks at BP, and Ford looks at Toyota. And these corporates are really far more engaged in ESG, the larger ones, than some of the smaller ones. But we need to get the smaller ones on board. How do companies use big data? One is through ESG integration. This is thanks to my former colleagues at State Street Global Advisors. There's a data-driven approach. We use machine learning. The data quality is getting improved. Reporting transparency. This is all FinTech helping in ESG integration, but still the definitions are not very clear. ESG applications of big data, we are using it for carbon emissions, supply chain analysis, social impact. However, as we say, there's a lot of data bias. ML models can perpetuate some of those biases. I'm on to impact investing, and all I can tell you is, in impact investing, we want to do socially what are the good things. Public pension funds, social wealth funds are trying to do the best things that they can on this. And I want to give two examples. Health in the Netherlands, PGGM, they're automating a lot of the health and taking away some of the jobs which they are replacing to reduce pressures, and they're gaining 0.27 quality adjusted life years. Then on blue bonds, T. Rowe Price shows targeting good water and clean water projects leads to better. And then I have to do a bit of plug in the last 30 seconds. My company uses a lot of big data. This is the climate change metrics that Lane Clark and Peacock uses to advise sovereign wealth funds and pension funds. But this is the way that health is really getting reconnected, because LCP advises the biggest health companies creating the drugs like Novo Nordisk, GSK, Pfizer, as well as the governments. And this is application of fintech. Then also in terms of stewardship dashboards, LCP does something similar. The rating of Schroders, BlackRock, LGIM, SSGA, etc., is done based on whether we are good on ESG integration, voting, climate change, and net zero. And there's also insurance with machine learning and AI to tell you, is insurance going to be, because of flooding, the same in Barbados as in India or in Japan? And all this is now cloud-based with big data. I want to end by showing you LCP does a lot of work in sport, and women's football, as well as football analytics, is helping the largest clubs and the best football players, like Man City's captain, organize his contract based on football analytics. So this is big data applied to football, and based on that, I conclude by saying we can only have limited impact without fintech, but we really need to improve the basics for the poorest, and we really need to go many more miles, earlier with Elevandi, but now with GFTN. Very important that communication continues and we keep humans at the center of all this learning. Thank you very much for your time.